In today's report, we explore explosive developments surrounding U.S. President Donald Trump's renewed and controversial interest in the annexation of Canada, and even Greenland. What's behind these provocative declarations? Are they simply political rhetoric, or signs of a deeper geopolitical strategy involving military posturing and long-term territorial ambitions? The issue resurfaced during a recent interview on NBC, where U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was confronted over Trump's repeated references to incorporating Canada into the United States. Rubio attempted to downplay the remarks, claiming Trump was merely responding to a past statement made by former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a claim suggesting that Trudeau had admitted Canada's economic survival depended on what Trump labeled as unfair trade practices with the United States. In Trump's reported response, he argued that if Canada couldn't function without exploiting U.S. trade, it might as well become the 51st state. Despite Rubio's attempt to frame this as mere hyperbole, he did not deny the recurring tone of Trump's expansionist discourse, and that tone is precisely what raises serious questions. It's worth noting that Trump has made similar statements in the past, including on social media platforms back in late 2024, where he accused the U.S. of subsidizing Canada to the tune of $100 billion per year. However, no independent Canadian or American source has confirmed such a figure. Analysts argue that Trump is likely confusing a negative trade balance, currently hovering around $45 billion, with a financial subsidy, which are entirely different concepts. Nevertheless, Trump has doubled down on the idea that many Canadians would prefer becoming Americans, citing supposed benefits in defense, taxation, and economic stability. While there's no evidence supporting mass public sentiment in Canada toward annexation, these claims are not merely symbolic. Just weeks before stepping down, then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was caught by a live microphone during a closed-door meeting with union and corporate leaders. In that recording, he acknowledged the seriousness of Trump's repeated threats, stating that the U.S. president saw annexation as an easy route to absorb Canada's vast wealth and natural resources. This sentiment was echoed by the new Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who confirmed that Trump had raised the issue multiple times in private diplomatic exchanges. Carney emphasized that Canada's sovereignty is non-negotiable and that the idea of becoming an American state was entirely off the table. But the ambitions don't stop at Canada. Trump has also made overtures toward Greenland, an autonomous territory administered by Denmark and a full member of NATO. In a formal address to Congress, he referred to the acquisition of Greenland as vital to U.S. national and international security, hinting that the United States would obtain control of the island one way or another. The wording carried an unmistakable tone of veiled threat, possibly suggesting military options, an unprecedented posture toward a NATO ally. Greenland's leadership responded immediately and firmly. The Prime Minister condemned the idea as disrespectful and reiterated that Greenland is not for sale, reminding the world that the island is not a piece of real estate but a sovereign entity within the Kingdom of Denmark. The backlash was swift and unanimous, with Danish officials standing firmly alongside Greenland in public statements made during a diplomatic visit to Copenhagen. Returning to Canada, the most dramatic escalation came on April 28th, the day of Canada's national elections. On the very morning of the vote, Trump posted a message on his social network urging Canadians to support the candidate who would finally bring Canada into the United States, referring to Canada as a beautiful landmass and the U.S.-Canada border as an artificial line drawn long ago. The statement was interpreted as an endorsement of conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, whose ideological views align closely with Trump's. However, Poilievre quickly distanced himself, rebuking Trump in a public statement and insisting that Canada's future would be decided solely by Canadians, stating firmly that the country would never become the 51st U.S. state. Prime Minister Carney also posted a video reiterating that only Canadians decide what happens within Canadian borders. This leads us to a critical question. What does Trump really want with these annexation narratives? From a legal and diplomatic perspective, forcibly absorbing a sovereign nation like Canada would violate fundamental principles of international law. It would constitute an act of aggression, potentially leading to an armed conflict between two historically allied nations. However, experts believe Trump may be leveraging this extreme rhetoric as a strategic tool, a form of geopolitical brinkmanship. By suggesting annexation, Trump exerts pressure during trade negotiations, exploits internal divisions in neighboring countries, and redirects public attention toward nationalist goals. This tactic may be aimed at reshaping the U.S. foreign policy landscape, especially in resource-rich regions like Canada and the Arctic. Military analysts point to real strategic motives underlying this rhetoric. Canada's vast deposits of rare earth elements, petroleum reserves, freshwater access, and Arctic proximity make it a prime target for long-term strategic dominance. Trump's statements, and the timing of their delivery, hint at a potential blueprint for a more assertive U.S. foreign policy, one that could involve military assets and power projection capabilities across North America. The same logic applies to Greenland, which holds immense value in terms of Arctic navigation routes, missile defense positioning, and natural resources. Control over Greenland would allow the U.S. to extend its radar coverage and bolster NORAD operations, especially with Russia and China intensifying their activities in the polar region. Interestingly, the situation draws disturbing parallels to the behavior of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump has been criticized for his lenient stance on Russia's territorial claims in Ukraine, and some analysts fear he may be trying to normalize expansionist doctrine, preparing the American public and political class for similar future moves under the guise of national interest or security. As global power structures shift, the idea of fixed borders becomes less certain. If leaders like Trump continue to influence U.S. policy, neighboring countries, even longtime allies, may find themselves navigating scenarios once considered unthinkable. Here at GeoWar News, we will continue to monitor these developments closely, with a special focus on the military strategies, technological implications, and geopolitical risks associated with such expansionist rhetoric. Stay alert. The world is changing, and not always peacefully. This is GeoWar News. Stay informed, stay strategic.